Are you ready to perform at your highest potential? Thank you for joining this GP Strategies webinar, where we'll explore best practices and innovative insights to help you and your organization improve performance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim, so much. It's always a pleasure to see you and be working with you, and to hear and see so many of my GP friends on the line today. I'm going to keep my chat open here while I pop open the slides. Kim, want to do a quick check to make sure you can hear me okay and see my slides just fine?
I see everything perfectly. Yep.
Wonderfully.
And you sound great.
Great. Fantastic. Well, as you join, please go ahead and put your location in the chat. Say hello to some colleagues, maybe new and old. Introduce yourself to folks that you haven't met before. We're going to share this virtual space together for the next hour or so to talk about conundrums, solving leadership development's biggest riddles. And I want to let you know, we're going to take a little bit of a humorous approach to this topic. That doesn't mean we aren't going to tackle some real issues and fail to address some real challenges, but we'll do so with a touch of humor, a little bit of tongue in cheek with some of the slides and some of the polls that I'll be popping up here. So I hope you'll come along with me and learn something, and also perhaps get a little bit of a laugh, a smirk, or a chuckle along the way, because we want to have some fun with this as we head into the final days of 2022, dealing with not only sort of settling our leadership plans for this year, but projecting what it is we're going to do in 2023. I'm Leah Clark, founder of Leader Connect, and I am truly delighted to be here with you today and to share this time and space. So here's the roadmap for the time that we have together. I have some things that I'm looking forward to sharing with you, some thoughts that hopefully will help you shore up or bolster your leadership development strategy for 2023. But I think one of the best parts of sessions like this is our ability to share with each other, to give your thoughts to your colleagues, to let others know what's top of mind within your organization. So when we look at leadership development in 2023 and beyond, what can we learn from each other? What's going on within our respective organizations, and how can we crowdsource some information and share it with each other today? So that's a little bit of what we'll be doing, especially in some of the upfront discussion. And then what we're going to do from there is talk about the conundrums that face leadership and learning professionals. I'm going to vacillate back and forth between leadership and learning. I'll talk about the conundrums from a leadership development perspective. The truth is, though, you'll see a lot of the conundrums reflected for the broader group of learning professionals, not just those who focus on leadership development. But we won't leave it there. I promise you that we won't introduce conundrums and then leave you to deal with them without some solutions. We'll talk about how you can create a strong foundation so that you don't get rattled by these riddles, so that as these conundrums pop up, as they tend to do, maybe you can't shoo them all away, but at least if you build a strong foundation to your leadership development strategy, they'll be less likely to throw you off course when those challenges or those riddles do pop up. So that's the time for today. I promise a couple of snarky little polls in here. I hope you keep your sense of humor and know that this is tongue in cheek, and yet also will present some real problems that I think many of us face when we draft or create a leadership roadmap and then have those derailers come along. So what I'd love to know, just to start, is what level of employee is your primary focus for 2023? If you could respond in the chat, and if you're so inclined, please go ahead and say why. Are you focused on your individual contributors? Maybe there's something in career development that you want to work on. Okay, Patrick is saying he's focused on his executives. New leaders is what Chelsea is saying, director level and above. Yeah, leaders. Tanya, I'm going to challenge us to get more specific than that. But yeah, leaders, frontline, leader of leader. Where are you focusing? So I see team leads, frontline employees, managers and supervisors on the shop floor. Yeah, so Susanna, welcome, and I'm glad you're here. Zach is saying mid-level, newer leaders. Annie's saying top performers. Okay, so it looks as though we've got a wide variety of of employees that you're focusing on. Not surprising. I expected somebody to put all in the chat, and that may be the case. But the truth is, and one of the reasons I wanted to surface this is a conundrum that we're going to talk about, and a theme throughout this webinar is the need to address multiple levels of employee, right? Sometimes we're focusing on individual contributors, leaders of leaders, frontline leaders, but knowing what all of you are focusing on, getting a little context from your peers helps us know not just what we're working on, but also what are others in our industry or in the leadership development space focusing on. So yeah, Nicole is saying all, but I see a lot of leaders. I see a lot of new leaders, mid-level, frontline leaders, not as many individual contributors, though I suppose since this is a leadership webinar, that may be where your focus is, but thank you for putting that in the chat. Hopefully you're getting a little bit of context for what others in our industry are focusing on, and you're doing a little bit of a comparison to where your organization is and where you're focusing in 2023. Okay, let's crowdsource a little bit more information. What topics are you focusing on? What's rising to the top of your agenda? Can you share that with your colleagues and let them know? I'm hearing a lot, and we'll get further into this in the time we have together. I'm hearing a lot around technical skill development. That's popping up a lot more than it has in the past. A lot of the clients that I'm talking to are worried about strategic thinking and critical thinking. Susanna is saying digital skills. Linda saying leadership essentials, people skills, back to the basics, purpose and culture, good. A lot of leadership skills in here, emotional intelligence, yeah, employee experience, resilience and well-being. I'm hearing a lot still about resilience. I don't see hybrid leadership in there. That's an interesting one that's popped up quite a bit. I think that's morphed and changed what it means to lead in a hybrid world and what leaders need. That every 6 months or so since COVID started, I've seen the definition of hybrid leadership change, and leaders need something different, right? At first it was, how does everybody work in a remote environment? And then it was a bit of, how do we transition, and how do we make sure that there is equity in those who are at home and those in the office? So hybrid leadership, I think, has been a critical topic. What it means has morphed and changed quite a bit in the past several years. About every 6 months, I see it sort of change. Yeah, Stephanie is saying time management and change management. Time management, Stephanie, is one that's coming up a lot, especially with individual contributors or employees. So they're demanding that a lot, asking a lot for that topic in a way that's different from what I've seen in the past. And Stephanie is saying psychological safety. Okay, so thank you for sharing this. I will talk a little bit more about what some of the industry data is showing, what my experience is showing in terms of the topics that folks are really focused on in 2023. But hopefully you got a benefit from hearing what your colleagues are focusing on and where they're going to spend their time in 2023. So thanks for getting us started and sharing a little bit of what's top of mind for you. I want to take a little bit of a pause for a moment and ask the question, this is a rhetorical one, where does learning and development stand, right? We know that there are a lot of employees that are demanding our focus and skills that we want to help either upskill, shore up, develop new skills across our organizations. You know, does that bode well for learning and development? We all have a vested interest in this particular topic. Is that something that reflects just our common interest, or is learning and development part of a broader focus, a primary agenda for our organizations? Well, let's take just a little bit of a pause here, maybe a step back, and get some context. When and we all experienced this, right? In 2020, when the pandemic first hit, everyone froze for a little bit, right? We didn't know exactly what was going on in our businesses or in learning and development. And there was this feeling of, well, let's just pause leadership development and learning and development until we figure out what is going on here, and whether or not this is an area where we can continue to invest and spend time, given all of the concerns and constraints that we have about our business. And then once we started to figure out how to operate in this, pandemic world, this virtual world that reshaped everything, right? It reshaped supply chain, how we purchased goods, how we worked. We started to sort of unfreeze and once again re-engage in several aspects of our lives, including learning and development. Now, that unfreezing led us to do things like L&D in a different way. We moved from ILT more to a virtual experience. But once we sort of got our bearings, in fact, my experience has been that learning and leadership development continued, maybe not in the same way, but there was a focus there. And SHRM released some great information earlier in this year. And in fact, they validated through their research that 57% of the survey respondents they asked said their budgets actually increased after the COVID-19 outbreak. And when they asked these questions, again, earlier this year, early in 2022, they said, do you expect your budgets to go up this year? What's sort of your prognostication for 2022? 67% of their HR managers said their L&D budgets would increase this year, meaning in 2022. And another 76% of employees said they would likely stay with a company that offered continuous learning. So certainly some validation that we are committed to learning and development. And when you look at that 76%, really important, because I know many of us on the phone and articles and research have certainly reaffirmed that learning and development, leadership development is a critical lever when you're trying to stem that turnover tide. So being able to certainly offer compensation, flexibility, but usually third, shortly after those first two other factors, learning and development is a critical factor that folks mention when they talk about whether or not they will stay with an organization or continue or pursue opportunities elsewhere. So really, really important. Now, that being said, and I don't have the numbers up here, but I'll share with you from the same study, what HR folks said was, despite the strong support for leadership development and learning and development, 52% faced resistance when asking for budget, and 54% said senior leadership sees L&D as a cost. So we're not certainly there yet, but there is this awareness for the importance and support for it, and some tension still about sort of lobbying for and fighting for a little bit the necessary resources. So what about 2023? Where are we going? Now, I want to ask you to put this in the chat. And I want to be really clear. We're not looking for you to offer numbers. We're not going to come knocking on your door and say, hey, you chose C. Let's have a conversation about that budget. We really just want to be able to share with each other whether or not your budget is going up, down, staying the same. And you can look at it as resources, a question of, are you investing resources in this area? Okay, so we're a bit all over the road. A good number are saying C, your budget is going up. I'm seeing staying the same, not sure yet. Okay, that's fair. Staying the same. All right, Ali is saying going down. Zoltan is saying not sure yet. Okay, so a little bit of a disparity in these responses. Now, here's what we can see in these numbers. And in your responses, while there is support for learning and development, and certainly we can all talk about that support, whether or not there is support from a business perspective is sometimes where there's a bit of a rub, right? Many of you on the phone are in talent management, in leadership development and learning and development, but are you able to get the kind of support for this type of investment, leadership development, training and development, that you believe in? Are you able to get the same support from your business leaders, from the C-suite and from your executives? Well, I think increasingly, not only do those of us in this industry, but the folks who are leading the business and in the C-suite are making the connection between how a robust learning and development, leadership development strategy connects to business challenges. More than ever, when you're reading articles, hearing CEOs speak, you're hearing them make the connection between some of their biggest challenges, including retaining and engaging employees, and the need to provide the opportunity for development. We've all made that case for years. Now I'm hearing it from folks who have not spent their lives living and breathing leadership development and learning development. Heads of business, CEOs, they're making the connection between we need to provide development opportunities for our people if we're going to retain and engage them. Another reason why I think this momentum is coming, not just from those of us who are in this business, but our business leaders as well, is that the turnover is happening not just at the rank and file, right? We talk about the turnover tsunami and the great resignation, but the truth is there's been a fair bit of turnover at the leadership level. And I think some of you commented on that in the chat, and needing to be able to backfill those leaders is significant. Many folks are promoting their leaders into people leadership positions sooner than they would have liked to because of the turnover, and they're finding that they have gaps. They have gaps in people leadership skills, in technical skills, and so this is a significant challenge. What we're also hearing is people have varying needs, as is evidenced by the topics that you put in there, right? People are working on issues that are emotional, self-awareness, self-management, stress management. They need help collaborating, expressing empathy, problem solving, strategic thinking. And last but not least, and this might be my favorite one, when we talk about the challenges that a strong learning and development strategy and leadership development strategy can answer, a lot of times I'm hearing more so than ever, learning and development provides our scattered teams with an opportunity for connection, more than I've ever heard it before. When we're struggling with how do we keep these digital teams connected? How do we help people feel a sense of community? One tactic that keeps coming up time and time again is training opportunities, learning opportunities, that chance for people to step away from their day-to-day responsibilities, focus on their development, and that action lets them know that you value them, you're investing in their development, and gives them the opportunity to connect with their colleagues, to share a laugh, to go into a breakout, to chat about some issue, to learn about a topic that around which they want to develop, growth mindset or emotional intelligence. So more than ever, I am seeing support for learning and development, for leadership development, to address critical issues and to be used as a new tactic or strategy for reskilling, upskilling, and for bringing teams together. Okay, so if the wind is somewhat at our back, what then is the struggle for leadership development professionals, and how can we get into those conundrums and what to do about them? So there's cursory awareness for the fact that L&D is supportive of addressing those really big strategic needs, at least a cursory awareness, at least lip service that our executives are giving to support for learning and development and leadership development. But budgets are not necessarily increasing across the board. Learning and leadership development professionals are in a lot of ways being asked to do more with less or with the same amount. So the struggle, I think, for many is quite real. And so what does a learning or leadership professional do? Well, the ones that I talk to, and hopefully some of this sort of situation resonates with you, you get a budget, you know the employees that you want to address, you have a good sense for what it is you want to support in terms of their skill development, and you try and do as much good for as many people as you can, given those budget constraints. But inevitably, there's something that comes along that has the potential to derail even the best of leadership development plans. There's a conundrum or a riddle that rattles even the strongest of leadership development strategies. And what I want to do is unpack each of them with the goal of suggesting some ways that you can mitigate those conundrums, that you can address those issues. They may not completely go away, but at least if you're aware of them, you can anticipate the way that you want to build your leadership strategy, your learning and development strategy, so they are less likely to be to crumble or to start to get weakened when those challenges come up. Let's get specific about what I mean by these conundrums. And here's where we're going to have a little bit of fun. There are 4 conundrums that I often see present a challenge to even the best intended leadership development strategies. So conundrum number 1, I call the curveball. Conundrum number 2, the Hydra. Number 3, content crunch, not just for breakfast anymore. And conundrum number 4 is the pile-on. So what do these look like? What do these feel like? Hopefully, you start to see a little bit of your own dilemma in what I'm about to explain here. And please feel free to put in the chat anything that resonates with you as I go along. But conundrum number 1, the curveball, it sounds something like this. You establish your leadership development plan. You have everything mapped out. You've either chosen a vendor, you've lined up your internal resources, you know what that learning journey and that larger strategy looks like. It looks beautiful. You've branded it. You've named it. You're ready to go off into the, sort of holiday evening with your eggnog, and you know that it's been locked down. You're ready to deploy it in the new year or in the coming months. And you then get this email from somebody saying that, hey, we have new leadership expectations or revised leadership expectations that only slightly align with the plan that you have in place. So here comes that curveball. Now, I promised my graphics people that we would not have the baseball go any further and actually injure our little employee here, but you have this thrown at you. With the best of intentions, something gets handed down to you that doesn't quite align with what you've already planned. Now, here's your snarky poll. Let's see who wants to play along with the serious answer, or who wants to go snarky. So you have it established and you get the curveball. What do you do? Do you put the training on hold and review your contract to see what you're obligated to and whether or not you can get out of this or pull your internal resources off? Do you spend money or time that you don't have to redo the curriculum? Or do you pretend that the email landed in the spam folder and proceed with your existing program? Okay, so some of us are spending more time and money, more likely A and B, but Margie says she'd rather do C. Yeah, absolutely B, but I wish I could do C. All right, so I'm glad that you're playing along here. And yeah, wouldn't C be nice? It went to spam. If I didn't see it, then I don't need to change anything. Well, hopefully you're seeing a little bit of that dilemma or that conundrum that you faced. How could that have been mitigated? Well, I want to suggest again, if you build that strong platform for your leadership strategy, if you build a base, then you won't be able to withstand every conundrum, but maybe you're in a better position to withstand some of them and to create a foundational leadership development approach that is less likely to get derailed by any of these riddles. And how do you want to do that? Well, the first conundrum, the curveball, might have been mitigated if you were really clear on your burning platform, So what do I mean by the burning platform? The burning platform is the source of urgency, sometimes the source of pain for your business. And that first conundrum might have been able to be mitigated or withstood if you were really clear on what that burning platform is and how your leadership development strategy is in service of that larger burning platform or that need. So what do I mean by that? What are the burning platforms that might be connected to your leadership development strategy? Well, first, do you know what strategic initiatives are going on within your organization? Is your organization trying to transform in some way, maybe from a pharma to a biopharma company, or maybe you're looking to expand into other businesses because your business model has been changed as a result of COVID? Is there a strategic initiative associated with how your business is transforming performing, that requires a different type of leader, that requires new behaviors around which you can structure your leadership and learning agenda. Is your burning platform retention? As folks see employees across all levels of the organization heading out the door, is that what you're working on? And does your leadership agenda need to be in service of helping to stem the tide associated with employee turnover? Is there a critical skill gap? Again, we'll talk a little bit later in the session about what skills, but I'm hearing from a lot of the clients that I speak with, we're moving people into leadership positions really quickly, and they're lacking certain people leadership skills or technical skills because of the exodus of other employees, and we need to shore up our people's ability to sell or to handle customer service issues. Last but not least, is there some broader culture change going on within your organization? The key point here is to understand what the organization's burning platform is and to ask the critical question, what are the behaviors that will drive business success? So some of the questions you might ask yourself, and these are just a sample. Do you have the leaders you need at each level to produce the results you're projecting? Do you need to shift your leadership style in some way based on the talent you have? Where's the attrition in your organization? And where do you have a leadership pipeline to replace it? Do you have leaders that have a digital mindset or are flexible? Now, a lot of times what I'll find is that the clients that I work with, they might say, well, we need conflict management. We need emotional intelligence. And that may well be the case. Those might be the right areas for you to focus on with your leaders. But why do you need those? Are you able to connect that particular need back to your burning platform? Again, your burning business platform, what it is that is most important in support of your business strategy. And then once you have that burning platform, is there agreement among your stakeholders that that is what's most critical? So, that human resources professional that came in with those revised leadership expectations and threw the curveball at you, you might say, well, she or he should have been part of that leadership development person's team, and they should have already been aware that those leadership expectations were coming. Woulda, shoulda, coulda, but every time, I've worked with a client where somebody comes in from another part of the organization and hands down expectations or competencies or something that has changed that starts to shake the foundation of the leadership strategy. I keep thinking about how important it is to have gotten all of those stakeholders and their buy-in to make sure that as much as possible, you have that support for the strategy that you're crafting. Manager buy-in, certainly that goes without saying, so that they give your leaders and your learners the time that they need to devote to whatever plans you put in place, and so that they can role model the behavior. Your executive team, absolute stakeholder buy-in upfront from your executive team, and buy-in after the fact. So once you've established that leadership strategy, how can you make sure that your executive team is connecting their messaging, their business priorities, their burning platform to the plan that you have in place? So all of this buy-in and connection to business strategy and burning platform, it's strengthening the strategy that you're putting in place. And my argument is making it less likely to be thrown off balance when by those conundrums that come up. And then last but not least, I think often the most neglected stakeholder in this equation is our end consumer, the learner. So how can you make sure that you are understanding what learning and development opportunities your learners say they need, so that leadership development, learning and development is being done for them instead of to them? And there are a lot of different ways you can get that stakeholder buy-in. So first way to overcome the conundrums is to establish the B of base, or your burning platform. Okay, so conundrum number 2, I call the Hydra, right? The Hydra is that multi-headed serpent that in Greek mythology, and every time you cut off one of their heads, another one appeared. I know it's a little bit of a dramatic metaphor, but you'll see where I'm going with this. So I think about the Hydra when I think of this scenario, which is Your facilitator walks into a classroom, which sounds a little bit like a bad joke. And it's the start of somewhat of a bad joke, right? Your facilitator walks into a classroom, and at a table, they have this sort of these multi-heads sitting there. You've got Bob. He's a leadership expert. He's gone through leadership development before. He knows what to do. He just wants emotional intelligence. That's where his focus is. And now you've got Christos. Christos is sitting at the same table, never led before, and really just needs the basics of trust and communication. Then we have, let's see if I can get this to animate, Samira. Samira is a new leader, and she's having a hard time with the transition to leadership and giving feedback to her people. She was their peer, now she's their leader, and that's a difficult transition for her. So she's in a slightly different place. And then Wayne's been a leader for a long time. He's never led at your organization, but he's been a people leader for a while. Just never had any formal training, but he knows what to do. And then last but not least, you've got June. She's sitting there, or maybe not, because she quietly quit. She decided that learning and development no longer fits in with her priorities, so she's not sitting there. And yet you've got 3 other tables in the room of new leaders who have been fast-tracked and really need your support in other ways. So what do you do when you have this sort of multi-headed, multiple personalities and people that you need to satisfy, and they're all sitting there in front of you? Well, snarky chat alert again. Do you deliver the topics as is? It'll hopefully help some, it'll be reinforcement for others. Do you ask your facilitator to alter the content, right? How many times have we done this? Can you just massage it and move it? And, when you're talking about this, know that some people are, going to get some things and some aren't. I see that I've got a couple people playing along with me here. Ask Bob to teach the class, because you're out of here. So Margie's letting Bob handle things. I see a couple of you are saying deliver it as is, it'll reinforce for some. Yeah, and Cynthia's saying that's the true nature of a facilitator. Absolutely, absolutely. And how many times do we ask them to do that, right? To meet those multiple needs and those multiple heads sitting in front of them. So what I want to suggest is that the Hydra could have been mitigated. None of these will go away completely, and I'm not suggesting that. But if you are really clear on the A of building your base, which is audience. So get really clear on your audience. And just saying leaders is not enough, right? Getting super clear on, are they a frontline leader? Are they a leader of leader? Have they led people in the past? Are they currently leading people now? Are they an up-and-coming leader? Maybe they have, experience leading people in a cross-functional environment. These are the things that you want to ask yourself, ask your internal team, work with a partner, getting uber clear on who your audience is. Also understanding their role in the organization. Is the group all part of one division? Are they coming from different parts of the organization? Another thing that you want to think about and evaluate. What are their prior learning and development experiences, either with you or elsewhere? Have they already experienced this particular topic? And so is it a repeat for them? And then also focusing, and I'll go a little bit deeper on this one as we move through, on the learner experience. Are they able to devote the time that you need them to, in-person, technology? Are they an audience with whom you can inject a little bit of humor? Do they like breakouts? Or are they all going to exit the webinar when you put them in a breakout? Getting really clear on the dynamics of who your audience is. I think a lot of folks have gotten better at this and developed learner personas, but burning platform number 1, and then number 2, getting clear on your audience. And then once you're clear on the audience, what are some strategies? What are some things that you can do? Well, first of all, you can create cohorts based on level, based on experience, based certainly on topics. Now, there are pros and cons to this. So if you create a cohort of folks who have similar experience, the nice thing is that you'll sort of have leveled the experience appropriately. The downside is they miss the opportunity to share their real world experience on whatever the topic is, conflict resolution, giving feedback, with some of the newer leaders. So just being aware that you can create cohorts. There are pros and cons depending on how you structure the cohorts. Sometimes it's nice to mix folks because you can have them learn from each other, but to a point I'll make in a moment, I think you need to be clear and let them know that, so there's not that feeling of, why am I sitting through something that maybe I feel a little bit more knowledgeable on. You can tame the Hydra by distinguishing learning journeys by segmentation, certainly putting together different paths based on the most common combination of needs that you see within those different learner personas or profiles. Set expectations, as I was just saying a moment ago. This may be repeat for some of you, but you have experience as leaders. We want you to share that experience with some of the newer folks. Newer folks, you know what it's like to be led. You're fresh from moving into this position. Maybe you can share what it feels like today to be led by somebody in this organization. So as long as you set the expectations up front, it can help to, again, sort of calm down the dissatisfaction that you sometimes get when you're trying to meet the needs of all of those different people and tame that Hydra. Another way, and some of this is in the messaging as much as it is in the configuration of the journey, connect back to your burning platform. Let your learners understand why it is that maybe, Bob, you did go through coaching at your last organization, but you're here now, and we really want to socialize a common definition of what good coaching looks like in our organization. And here's why coaching is so important to us as we, back to burning platform, look to elevate the innovation in our organization or transform. So, taming the Hydra, again, you can create cohorts, get clear on setting expectations, help people understand why they're going through the experience, what the burning platform is, and what it is that you want to accomplish with your leadership development agenda. And then certainly sometimes create personalized learning plans. Okay, I'm keeping an eye on my clock and want to make sure I move along. Conundrum number 3, which I call the content crunch. As I mentioned before, it's not just for breakfast anymore. So what is the content crunch? So the content crunch is when you have certain topics that you want to cover and you don't have the content that you need or not shaped the way it is. So you either stretch it or you crunch it or you try to make it fit the many different needs that you're trying to fulfill. So when you have the content crunch and you're trying to stretch something, trying to make things work, do you say, I can't pick everything, and I hear the needs that people have. I'm going to try and pick content that covers as broad an audience as possible, knowing that I'll lose some. Do you let them self-select the content online, knowing they may access nothing, and they might? Or do you choose one group to focus on? I'll catch up with the next group next year. We're not going to get to them, but if they're still around, it's going to be their turn next. Well, I'll be honest with you. A lot of what I hear clients doing, and no judgment here, because this is part of the challenge, is they choose C, right? As Linda said, I'm gonna choose one group next year, and hopefully I'll get to the others if they're still around when we recreate our leadership strategy or learning and development plan next year. So how to mitigate the content crunch? The S of base, really get clear on what skills you need, right? So here is where I am seeing a lot of the conversation around what skills are most critical right now. I will let you know that McKinsey in 2020 did a study, and at that time they found that 44% of companies anticipated a skill gap in the next 5 years, which means we are in the midst of that skill gap right now. And in order to bridge that gap, a vast majority, a good number of organizations are looking to upskill or reskill. Some are looking to hire, augment with outside contracted resources, but by and large, people are making the bet on upskilling the existing talent that they have in their organization. One of the obstacle is, and this again is in the SHRM research, is that 35% of HR professionals said that they don't have the content that they need to meet their needs. So there is a content gap, a content crunch. What are the topics that folks are focused on? Well, you shared some of them at the outset. I'm hearing a lot, again, about technical skills. That means different things depending on some of the industry. Emotional skills, again, self-awareness, stress management, skills like, when we get into the social side of things, empathy, conflict resolution, collaboration, cognitive, a lot of critical thinking, strategic thinking, that's been bubbling up to the top of the list. And I will tell you again, in the same SHRM study, 76% of organizations were giving importance to soft skills. So again, I've seen technical bubble up, but still a good number of both employers and employees, if you look at the data, they're very, very aligned around the need for soft skills. What do they mean by that? 54% said leadership, 44% said communication and collaboration, and 42% said critical thinking and problem solving. But getting really clear on what the most critical skills are that you need, back to the audience, back to the burning platform, and then create journeys based on the content that you have. Now, one of the things that I want to say here is, I want to say a lot, so I'm moving ahead, is you don't have to solve everything with a workshop. When you take a step back and you realize that you can't crunch the content the way you need, sometimes what folks do will say, well, can we cut emotional intelligence down to an hour? Can we take something that should be a really thoughtful full day and put it into 45 minutes? My advocacy is to say, rather than solve everything with a workshop, is there some other way that you can bring that particular topic to your learners or your leaders? A podcast, an article, a coaching circle. So many of you are really good at this. Don't solve everything with a workshop, but take a step back and say, what are the other ways I can take this content and bring it to my people? What we also advocate for, and my colleague Matt Donovan has done a great job of talking about this, is, do you have a content strategy? Do you have a content strategy? And what we mean by that is, can you step back and really thoughtfully evaluate the content that you do have, so that you don't build, buy, create. And it probably comes as no surprise to many of you that I like creating and building, but you need to stop for a minute and really do that audit, that assessment, and come up with a content strategy. Here are some ways that you can look at your content and do that evaluation. Number one, burn. What do we mean by that? Well, if the content is not at least 50% relevant to what you need, and if it's going to take so much time and resources to get it where you need to be, get rid of it. Some organizations don't have enough content, others have too much and it's not relevant anymore. So have the intestinal fortitude to burn where you need to. Borrow. Does the content exist elsewhere within your organization or open sourced? Now, borrowing from an open source, there are pros and cons, right? It can be a really cost-effective way of bringing some other topic into your organization. Sometimes those sites are gated, sometimes it doesn't quite align with your point of view. So, so you want to curate with some thought. Where I really like curation when you're dealing with content crunch is curating allows you to bring in a very narrow bit of content and meet a very specific need. So you might not need an entire course on emotional intelligence, but maybe you really need to help your people with empathy. That's a great opportunity to borrow, to go source an article, a micro-learning asset, or something to bring it in and address the content crunch need there. Buy. Is there an off-the-shelf solution that you can consider buying? Again, strong support here, advocacy is for finding a partner or purchasing something that still gives you some flexibility, some way of flexing that content to meet, again, as many of those learner needs as you have. But sometimes when you don't have the expertise in-house, you can buy it. When you buy off the shelf, I would still say buy something off the shelf that allows you to flex and mold what you need. Bend. Is there a solution that can be customized to meet the business need. What's my example here? Maybe you need your people learning about financial acumen and your CFO has a lot of great knowledge and content, or you want them to know about strategic thinking and you've got a head of strategy that has a strong point of view that's connected to your organization and your industry. Great time to bend what you have. Caution there. Your CFO might not be the best trainer or instructional designer, so there might be some work there on the part of your training and development team to bend the content, but certainly it's important to think about where else you have content within the organization when you do this analysis. And then build. Of course, if you need to build something from scratch, finding something, a provider or a partner or an internal partner that can work with you to get you what you need. So burn, borrow, buy, bend, and build solutions. And I'm going to throw blend in there, but I know there's a lot of bees coming at you, so we'll get there in just a minute. Okay, so let's talk about conundrum number 4, the pile-on. This conundrum sounds something like this. You get alignment for the burning platform. You're aware of the burning platform and you connect your leadership strategy. You get super clear on your audience. You know what skills it is you want to tackle, and those 3 things connect to each other. Now you have to create the learner experience. So you get in with your stakeholders. Your CFO is supportive, but says, I want a one-shot experience with no time away from real work. Your head of sales read an article about artificial intelligence and they want simulation, even for the reflection parts. Your HR partner wants to bring everybody together to forge connection, except for those who work remote. So suddenly you have this pile-on sort of mess that doesn't look particularly appealing or desirable, but everybody has an opinion on what that experience should be. So what do? I'm going to go with instructor-led training because it's what I know, and I love ILT, so no disparaging there, but it's what I know. I'm going to go with ILT. I'm just going to add another virtual call to calendars because it's the safest way. Go digital and hope people remember their passwords and engage, or quietly quit for real because there's no way to satisfy everyone. This is my last snarky poll or chat of the session. So I promise you no longer need to get snarky with me unless you want to. But you get the point, right? Everybody wants something else, and it is almost impossible to create something that is appealing. What do? Last part of base, really focus on the experience. And we're going to send an asset out for those of you on the call and for those of you who are listening to the recording that will help you to frame up how to think about the experience, how to create a blended experience. First, begin with the learner in mind. Make sure you're putting them front and center. What do they need? How do they like to learn? What time can they spend away? How technology savvy are they? Really, again, going back to them as a stakeholder, start with them when you're talking about the experience and think through in what way will they learn best. And again, Hydra might not meet every need or every head, but begin with that learner in mind as best you can based on your analysis of them and put them front and center as you construct that experience. Leverage technology and be smart about it, not technology for technology's sake. Where do you want to bring in a simulation, or where can a webinar address a need? Making sure that technology is not about a shiny object or something that makes noise or plays a video in front of you. It has to serve a purpose in terms of what you want the learner to get out of it, whether you want them to self-assess through an online assessment, whether you want them to hear a good coaching conversation, and so an audio is used, whether you want to bring them through in a cohort in a digital experience. Leverage technology, but do it thoughtfully based on what it is you're trying to draw out and what you want to accomplish. Enhance human connection. I said at the beginning that one of the wonderful realizations that so many are having is that training and development is a great way of enhancing human connection while we're all scattered and in this new hybrid world. So use it in a way that allows people to share their experiences, to talk to each other, maybe to get guidance from a coach or a facilitator. A big pet peeve of mine is when we bring people together in some sort of a same time learning experience and they're quiet and their heads down. I'm not saying there can't be a little bit of reflection or self-reflection in that interaction, But just make sure you're not over indexing on that, because you're missing the opportunity that you have with those human beings together, sharing and learning in that experience. Nurture engagement. That means making sure you're communicating, especially if it's a journey over time, bringing in a little bit of healthy competition, a little bit of, again, communication, camaraderie, competition, all part of nurturing their engagement and keeping them involved in that experience. Making sure you drive applicability and sustainability. So again, over time, not just a one-time event, but again, when you think of your experience, are you beginning with the learner? Where does technology fit in? Where are those opportunities for human connection? Am I keeping them engaged along the way, or did I launch something and then, sort of fade into the woodwork? How can I drive applicability and sustainability? And then I like to think of it as a layer. So how are you thoughtfully layering different experiences? Don't just dump everything at once like that sandwich, but where is the ILT? Now, how can we artfully follow up with a coaching circle? Maybe now a webinar makes sense. And then, I was saying to one of my colleagues, I can't remember who it was, but some fashion person a really long time ago said, before you head out the door, take one thing off. And this must have been back in the, 70s or 80s, where people had scarves and earrings and hats and everything. But the idea was to simplify. We tend to put a lot on, and sometimes less is more. And I think of that odd guidance here, which is to say, maybe take one thing off. When you create this beautiful journey, I feel like we're always adding one article too many, one capstone too many, myself included. So maybe layer thoughtfully, but then take one thing off before you go out the door, or one thing off before you launch your leadership journey. And then pilot. If you're not piloting, with your provider, with your internal resources, you're missing the opportunity to learn from these folks and tweak along the way. And then where possible, creating personalized learning plans. So the 4 conundrums as we wrap up here: the curveball, the Hydra, the content crunch, the pylon. I'm not saying that they'll ever fully go away, but if you can address them by building a strong base, your burning platform, your audience, your skills, your experience, if you're thoughtful and diligent about making sure that those are there, again, you're less likely to get rattled by the riddles. So I'd love to know, in the last couple minutes we have as we wrap up, what conundrum did we miss? As I was going through these, what is it that gets thrown at you that is often most likely to derail your leadership strategy? Even when you have, the best of intentions to have the buy-in and the socialization, what often throws you off your game? And if it's one of the ones that we shared already, you can put that in the chat. But I'd love for those of you to say, what conundrum is your biggest challenge of the 4 that you saw, or what's one that we missed in the time that we had together? Maybe the 4 that we had were pretty comprehensive. Any challenges? One region of a global L&D group who is so dominant doesn't address all needs. Absolutely. And Ellen, I was certainly thinking of that person when I was thinking about the curveball. I've seen that happen, particularly in global L&D organizations, where there are regional plans and then somebody comes in and says, oh, we're doing this, over in Switzerland or in New York, and then everything gets thrown. Reduced time for learning. Yeah, Carl, that's a really good one. And so I think the experience is particularly important when you're thinking about that. People being too busy to attend. Yep. And again, talking about your audience, your learners, what are their time constraints? How can they engage? And if you're back to work, back to the same way they've always done things, keeping it alive. Yep. And that sustainability is so important there for sure. Which of these, and I know we're just about wrapping up, I want to just ask you, which part of base do you think is the hardest to address? And is it that burning platform, really making that connection to your HR strategy, and more importantly, your business strategy? Is it that Hydra and the multiple audiences, getting clear on the audience, the skills, the content crunch associated with getting the skills right, or the experience? So what's hardest to address? Burning platform, audience, skills, and experience. In some ways, this is the other side of the coin that I asked with. Yeah, so Linda's saying burning platform. And yet, Linda, I would say the most critical, burning platform. Okay. there's always that part of me as I'm putting these together that says, well, people know the burning platform, right? They connect. But it's interesting to see that you all are feeling that pain profoundly, and it's worth the effort, right? Because if you can connect that strategy to what's important to the business and what those business outcomes are, I think that is probably the most significant aspect of BASE that will allow you to build something that is, again, foundationally super strong. So here we have our learners, much like, and I know that I have, and Patrick makes a good point, burning platform, because you don't control what the burning platform is. You don't control it, but awareness, right? Awareness is so, so critical. So here we have our learners in a house. I know I've introduced a lot of snarky polls and conundrums. What I really hope you remember is BASE, right? And just like you wouldn't, start to fill your house with furniture or decorate or paint or hang curtains before you have that foundation, right? You don't want to jump to a point where you are developing learning journeys or buying content or doing things until you're really clear on the foundation of your leadership development approach. Because if you're not clear on the base, that foundation isn't there and you're more likely to get derailed. So build a base for your learning and leadership strategy. When you do that, you'll be able to minimize the conundrums. I make no promise that there won't be a curveball coming at you, but maybe you can duck having been more aware of what's coming, or what your colleagues and stakeholders are working on. Maximize the alignment with the business, and that's why I go back to saying that the B burning platform is most critical. And then ultimately, when you're able to do this, I do believe that you're going to be able to deliver results for your people, back to that turnover and engagement and people's desire for professional development. We see it time and time again. Deliver what your people want and what your organization needs in those business results. So with that, my watch says 12 o'clock on the dot, which on the one hand, I didn't leave time for questions. If there are any, I can certainly stick around, but I do want to wish you good luck in the new year. Happy holiday, whichever holiday you celebrate. And I appreciate you spending the time together and sharing some information with us, and spending a little bit of time to talk about those conundrums and how you can overcome them.
Thank you, Leah. It was such a great discussion. And I want to say a big thank you to you, and a good holiday season coming up. And I want to thank everybody for taking time to join us today and for your attention and contribution. We hope that you'll join us again for an upcoming webinar. So be sure to visit GP Strategy's website for any future sessions. And like Leah said, I will stick around for a few minutes as well if you want to put any questions in. And if she can't answer them now, we can always answer them during the follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And again, thank you, everyone.
This webinar is brought to you by GP Strategies. Together, we can create a world where business excellence makes possibilities achievable. You can access more webinars or download additional resources at gpstrategies.com/resource-library.